In this video, we're gonna get to the next precious gemstone, ruby. We all know that ruby has a beautiful red color. If you've seen our video about the emerald gemstone, you'll know that it's an extremely old jewelry, and it has been more than 3,000 years since it was used for jewelry. Rubies are old, but not as old. The oldest ruby that was found for jewelry is about 200 BC in China. And in the same era, the first ruby mine that was found was also in China. It is also written in history that rubies took the Silk Road to get all the way to Persia and Europe. You could also find verses about rubies in the Bible. The places that love rubies the most, you can find them in China and India. It was the same thing thousands of years ago. They loved rubies. Ancient Hindus believed that rubies came from the sun. They also believe that if you have a ruby stone with you, you can absorb sunlight much better. Something like this has not been scientifically proven, but this was a belief that Hindus had, and they still have it to this day. As you know, diamonds are the hardest things on earth, but rubies are in second place, and they're the second hardest thing on earth. So what is the formula that makes up rubies? Ruby is a type of stone that comes from aluminum oxide, titanium, copper, manganese, chromium, and iron, and this is the formula. Even though ruby originated from modern-day China and it went all over the world, but the international name for it is in Latin. Ruby comes from the Latin word ruber, which basically means red. And it's good to know the reason ruby is red is because of the chromium levels. The way you can appraise a ruby stone is based on its size, the cut, the clarity, and most importantly, the color. We also said it in the emerald video. The color is the most impressive and important thing about a stone. If it's blood red and it looks like a piece of pomegranate, and if it shines under light beautifully, it has the highest value you can imagine. In the ruby market, the most valuable ones are called blood red. Just like we said, the chromium levels determine how red a piece of ruby is. If there is a lot of chrome, the red becomes darker and darker, but if there is less chromium, it turns lighter and it actually turns pink. The most valuable ruby has a good amount of chromium, and it has to be blood red for it to hold the most value. Just like we said, there's less chromium in pink ruby, but businessmen and jewelers all over the US call light red ruby pink ruby. And just because of the wording, it brings up the value of this stone. Businessmen know what they're doing, because for a simple word, you could sell a certain stone for a higher price. This is the map of ruby mines all over the world. The bigger the dot, the more ruby is in that location. As you can see, the biggest ruby mine in the world is in Myanmar. Of course, there is in Afghanistan and Pakistan, India, and East Africa. You cannot find ruby all over North America and South America. And in Europe, there's barely any. There's only one place that a little bit has been found, and that's North Macedonia. A lot of people mistake ruby for another gemstone called the spinel. The spinel is another red stone but doesn't have the value of the ruby. Another thing that separates it from ruby is that it has less clarity and it's not as high quality. And this is the formula. Even though it took many more years for rubies to be used as jewelry in the world, but the way they were formed in Earth's crust, they're very similar, about 3 billion years ago. Even though Myanmar has the most amount of rubies in the world, and there are plenty of more mines in Asia, but they don't have the best quality ruby. The best quality ruby can be found in Mozambique, Africa. Rubies has another branch which is called sapphire, and you could say it's more valuable than ruby itself. You might remember we said there are 4 precious gemstones. The first one is diamond, emerald, ruby, which this video is about, and sapphire, and it deserves its own video. The biggest piece of ruby that has been found was in the 1950s somewhere in Africa. It had a weight of about 2 kilograms, which is 8,500 carats. This piece was sent to the US, which was considered a gift to the government, but it seems like the US didn't really take care of it very well, because what they did with it was ruin it. They cut this giant piece of ruby into the Liberty Bell, and you could say it lost its value in a way. If it was here today, it would have historic value rather than the ruby itself. But unfortunately, in 2011, when they took it to Delaware for a show, it was stolen, and to this day, it has not been found. If you want to see the most expensive cut piece of ruby, it's this one right here. This piece of ruby was so beautifully cut and it has such a unique color that they call it pigeon's blood. Another name for it is the sunrise ruby. This ring, which has the giant piece of ruby with 2 diamonds on each side, sold in 2015 for a price of $30,420,000. This piece is the most expensive stone that's not a diamond. The buyer was an anonymous person from Switzerland. It seems like the Greeks really loved ruby and making up lies about it, because they would say ruby brings health, knowledge, and success. All that might be right, but where do you get knowledge from? If you want to look for a stone that caused the most amount of scams in history, ruby is the top one choice. There are plenty of stones in the wild that look similar to ruby, and if someone is not experienced and doesn't know precious stones, they're gonna make a mistake and mistake it for ruby. Scamming with ruby started when this stone hit the European market, and the Europeans didn't really know much about these types of stones, and that is why they would sell a lot of red stones and sell it as ruby for a much higher price. But the Asians were experts at these stones, and you couldn't scam them that easily. If you take a very high quality ruby and compare it to a piece of diamond, the ruby is most likely more valuable. And if you want to compare it to diamond, a high quality piece of ruby is much more rare than a high quality piece of diamond. Unfortunately, you can't really determine the price of ruby because it's not like gold. You could say X dollars for X grams. The way you can price ruby, it's only based on the cut, clarity, color, and the weight. As you could see, these are 2 pieces of ruby. The left one is a natural one. The right one was created in a lab. Even though it has the writings, you really couldn't tell a difference between them and tell which one is fake, unless you're an expert. Most gemstones, especially precious gemstones, to get a full understanding on what's good of what's bad, you actually have to go to class for it. This was the 3rd gemstone we introduced to you guys. The 4th and last one is sapphire. And after that, we'll make plenty of videos about different types of gemstones, which there are plenty of. In your guys' opinion, is ruby more beautiful or emerald? Obviously, we can't enter diamond in the argument.